Okay, 2.4. Okay, multiplying and dividing. Now we're talking about integers. Remember in our last class, integers is, it's the number line. Okay, it is all the numbers on a number line. We're not talking about fractions. We're not talking about decimals. What we're talking about is all the numbers on that number line. Okay, so I'm going to multiply and divide. So the first thing we got to go through is as far as rules, right? So multiplying. If I multiply a positive times a positive, I get a positive. And if there's a little glare there, you can at least listen. A positive times a positive gives you a positive. A negative times a negative gives you a positive. Now notice these things can be in parentheses. That's okay. This is exactly on how you would see things written anyhow. So a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive, those things are negative. Now here's the thing. If I multiply odd amount of negatives, if I multiply an odd amount, so say I multiply 5 negative numbers together, my answer will be negative. If I multiply an even amount of negatives, say I multiply 6 negative numbers together, my answers will be positive. If there's an odd amount multiplied together, the answer is negative. If there's an even amount multiplied together, the answer is positive, okay? So those are some of the rules, and probably you already knew most of those rules anyhow. So now let's talk about some of these examples. You're gonna see things written a couple different ways when you're talking about multiplying. One is, you're just gonna see it just like this with this little dot in the middle. Dot meaning multiply. So -7 times 3. You got a negative and a positive. So my answer is going to be negative, and multiply the two numbers together to get 21. This probably at this time, you're going to have to start working on your math facts. Get those multiplying things down a little bit. 0 multiplied by any number, 0. Now here's another thing that you'd see. You might not see that multiplication sign. You're going to see a parentheses. If there's no sign in the middle, it's multiply. If there's no sign there, it's multiply. Notice a negative times a negative. Automatically, you got to get rid of the, I talk about getting rid of the negatives first because that's the easiest thing to go to. A negative times a negative. I have an even amount of negatives. The answer is going to be positive. I know my answer is going to be positive. You don't have to put the plus sign there, positive sign. 3 times 5, which is 15. Or just 15, by the way. I don't care how many numbers I put in a string. There's an even amount of negatives. Even amount of negatives. So your answer is going to be positive. I take care of that right away, and then I just multiply numbers. Now here, is this easy? Absolutely not. You could do it a couple different ways. You can go from left to right. 7 times 6, 42. 42 times 2, 84. Or you can just write 84. Now the last example here, -2 times -3 times -4. 1, 2, 3. You have 3 negative numbers. Your answer will be negative. Take care of that first. If you take care of the sign first, now all you have to do is worry about multiplying. That's tough enough. Worry about the multiplying. 2 times 3, 6. 6 times 4, 24. So I think you should go in that process as far as to say, hey, by the way, what do I want to handle first? Well, the first thing that you want to handle is the answer going to be positive or negative? That's the first thing that I would do. All right. Kind of not a great dry erase board, but we're going to go with it. Because now we got to talk about exponents. Exponents, you're going to see 2 different ways, and there are 2 different answers to this thing. The first thing would be this, -5 squared. Notice, the -5 is in parentheses, so that thing is squared. So this would be -5 times -5. We've talked about exponents, and we've talked about expanding them or contracting them. This says you multiply it twice. You do not multiply it by 2. This isn't -5 times 2. Don't do that. This is -5 times -5 because you got to write it twice. There's an even amount of negatives. My answer is going to be positive 5 times 5, which is 25. Now let's go a little different. Say I don't have this, and say it looked like this. Say I have this negative on the outside. This negative does not go with the 7. The 7 is squared, so I got this. This is like saying -1 times 7 squared. If the negative is not in parentheses, you leave it on the outside. So now this is -1 times 7 times 7. You have an odd amount of negatives. You just have one negative, so your answer is going to be negative. 1 times 7, well, that's 7. 1 times any number is that number, times 7, which is 49. Okay? It's important to make sure that you know on how to do those exponents, because those are the things that are going to cause you the most issues as far as especially when we start going into order of operations. Okay? Let's do some other examples and talk about when we're doing, now we're going to talk about, let's do some division stuff. So if I look like dividing integers, it's going to be the same, most of the same properties take place. So if I was going to, now I'm going to talk about dividing. And if I divide a positive, divided by a positive, my answer is positive. Okay, kind of like with multiplying. If one of your numbers is negative, I don't care whether it's in the denominator or whether it's in the numerator, your answer is going to be negative. It doesn't matter, but notice what we've done here. There's an odd amount of negatives. One of the numbers is negative, so it's got to be negative. It follows the same kind of rules that you're doing, and I apologize, it looks like there's a little bit of glare, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's do some of these examples. Okay, an example would be this. Here's an example of -12 divided by 6. Now here's also, I'm going to point this out. Okay, sometimes people see this. Well, I didn't draw it really well. Say this negative is directly by the division symbol. Okay, what I do is I say push that up to the top so you don't get confused. So I have -12 divided by 6. This negative doesn't go with both. It doesn't do both of those. You don't have -6 and -12. You don't have that, okay? It only goes with one if it's out to the side. Answer is going to be -12 divided by 6, which is 2, okay? Let's do a couple more examples of dividing. This is going to get progressively worse. This board, I can see that for sure. Here's an example. We've already talked about it, 0 divided by -5. When 0 is in the numerator, can you see that glare? When 0 is in the numerator, your answer is 0. Okay, cool. What if 0 is in the denominator? If 0 is in the denominator, your answer is undefined. Okay, let's do this. What about 48 divided by -3? Again, practicing your math facts is to say, now I could do the long division on this thing. 3, remember the denominator goes into the numerator. Now notice, I don't even look at that negative sign because a positive divided by a negative, I know my answer is going to be negative. Get that out of the way and don't worry about it. 3 goes into 4 once. 1 times 3, which is 3, subtract. Bring down the 8. 3 goes into 18, 6. Multiply. Remainder of 0, my answer is -16. Okay. What if you're asked now to evaluate? Remember, we started to talk about evaluating, and remember that they are expressions, algebraic expressions. So if I look at this, if I say I have this x divided by y, and I want to evaluate when x is equal to -24 and y is equal to 6. Here's the thing. When you have this, you take these numbers and you plug them in. So -24, which is x, 6, which is y. Now again, this should be, again, your first question is it positive or negative? You have one negative number, the answer is going to be negative. Now all you have to do is to do the division. 24 divided by 6, which is 4. Okay? Okay, this is, we'll do more of the, notice how chapter 1 and chapter 2 are similar. They mirror each other, they just go a little bit more in depth. So, here's the thing. continue to work on your multiplying math facts, get better at that, again, until chapter 5, and then you don't need them because then we're going to have a calculator, okay? So now what we're going to do is that I'll make a quick pause and I'll do the next video, which talks about order of operations.